Hi, this is Rhonda Kuning here again, and today I'm working on a manila file folder. I want to make a book out of a bunch of these, so that's why I'm adding the thread to it. I'm using a heavy-duty polyester thread and making a loop on the spine so that I can thread a ribbon through a bunch of these and make a book out of them. And just wanted to have them so that I could paint them separately and then put them together into the book format after I'd painted them. I put some paper tape, it's a medical tape, but I also use it to make washi tape out of, and a layer of gesso to start. And this is a cog that I've printed out. Hopefully I'll have a link to my webpage and have a download if you want to make this yourself. You can download this and print it up on your printer. I sealed it with some spray enamel so that it wouldn't bleed after I got it wet. And I've got a heap of pattern tissue, so I love using it too. So this is another piece of artwork with some pattern tissue on it. And I wanted to keep just the lines on, not to have too much of the printed words, because I've got a whole heap of verses and things that I want to put on this page, so I don't need the extra words. And I noticed this paper, actually the ink ran. I haven't had that problem before with tissue paper or pattern tissue paper. So I've sealed that with some matte medium and varnish, and it also helps to glue down any stray bits. So I decided to use binder medium to glue down the cog, and seeing as I've got it out, I also use it to put the printouts that I've got, and I've got the definition of believe and imagine and create, and I've also put on there a few Bible verses, John 11:27, John 14:1, Ephesians 3:20, Isaiah 65:17, and Psalm 51:10. And they're all to do with creating and believing and imagining. And I'm gluing those down also with the binder medium. And I've chosen a bunch of transparent colours, and that's what I point out here, the difference between the transparent mark and the opaque mark on those paint tubes. It's usually an open shape for the transparent ones and a solid shape or a half solid shape for the opaque and the semi-opaque colours. And I hate plastic tubes, and this is why. This colour in particular always splits. I think I've bought 3 tubes of this colour and they've all split. That's the third one. So not happy with those. I much prefer the metal tubes for that reason. And I just wanted to splat this around and use the yellow as the yellow is the most transparent of the colours. So that's why I've put it down first as a base. And just looking at the difference between those two yellows, I probably won't even bother buying another tube of that yellow. And I got some water and spritzing it on there just to help me lift some of the colour, but not all of it. And this is a baby wipe that I used from my last art journal page, and it's still got some distress ink on it, and of course the water has activated the distress ink. It's actually put more distress ink on my hands than it has on the page, which is interesting. So that's one of the reasons why I swapped the baby wipes, but they were dry baby wipes, otherwise it wouldn't lift the paint off like that. And just trim around those excess edges just to neaten it up after it's dry. It's so much easier to do when it's dry. And this is the magenta and the turquoise for the next layers. Add some water and some matte medium and varnish to dilute and make it runny, because the paints I use are impasto paints, so if you want them runny you need to dilute them with either medium or water. If you use too much water, they can lift off the substrate after a time, so it's much better to use some medium when you're diluting it, even if you add the water as well. And this time I use a fresh baby wipe because I want to actually smudge the paint around rather than lift off parts of it. And I love the cloudy effect it gives. And because I've smudged all the previous splodges, add some more splodges until I'm happy with it. And I don't leave it to dry before I start on the next colour, but I try not to mix the magenta and the green because otherwise you'll end up with mud. And I found the fan brush gives a finer spray, so if you want both size splodges you really need to use a couple of brushes to get the mixture of dots size. And yeah, now I've got a fresh baby wipe for the green or the turquoise so that I don't end up with mud. And I don't want to put too much of the turquoise on as a smudge because I want to add some blue as my next layer. So I'm mostly doing spots and splatters. And these are what I'm using to add the blue. They're die cut foam shapes, and the blue is I can't remember what sort of blue it is. I think it's a phthalo blue. And I've diluted that with some matte medium and some water. It's really runny. And I tried to use the die cut as a stencil, but it's much more effective as a stamp than a stencil. I'm not overly happy with it as a stencil, but so that's why I smudge it out. And you can see where I got that shape from. It's actually an enlarged version of that small cog. So I tried to use the baby wipe to stencil it rather than the paintbrush. Not overly happy with that either, so I just go on to the stamping instead. It helps to be flexible when you're doing mixed media because things don't always work out the way you plan. You could of course start all over again, but I don't see the point in doing that when I'm having so much fun doing the one I'm doing. And this was fun. It was really good fun. And the die cut I used had lots of different sizes and shapes of cogs, so I had quite a variety. I also had some other chipboard ones, but I stuck with using the foam because it was easier to work with as a stamp because it was flexible and I could lift it off without smudging it too much. Yes, and right in the middle there, that's where I wanted it. Perfect. And the brayer helps to get it to print really well. But some nice ghosted prints look good as well. And this is the smallest cog on that die cut set. It really doesn't show up as much of a cog, it shows up more of a star. So I'm just smudging around some of that paint, and now I'm using a brown watercolour pencil just to add a bit of a shadow to that main cog, and I'll also do the other smaller cogs that I've stamped on there. It helps to give them a bit of a three-dimensional effect. It gives them a drop shadow effect. And I decided to use the brown because it's a bit softer than the black. And there's quite a bit of black in there already. I didn't want to have lots and lots of black. Have a bit of variety. The brown gives a softer shadow than the black does. And I went around the edge with a black watercolour crayon as a change from using the black archival ink pad to smudge around the frame. I decided to use a black watercolour crayon, and now I'm just adding the water to the watercolour crayons and pencils to activate the pigment. And I love the effect that it gives. It's nice and soft, and you can smudge it out and blend it out as much as you like. Because I've used the artist quality acrylic underneath, it doesn't reactivate, and it doesn't lift up. So you can add the water over the top without any problem at all. And I added a little bit more pigment in there where I wanted it darker, because I knew I wanted to write in those spaces, and I wanted a nice dark background for it, but not too dark. And I used the fan brush to activate the black crayon around the edges so that it wouldn't give a defined line around the edge. It's more of a smudged brushed line if you use the fan brush. And now some writing with my paint tubes. I just roughed in where I wanted the words to fit with the pencil. That's what I was doing. It's a bit hard to see what I was doing with it before, so that I knew that the words would fit. And yeah, if you want to see how I made these little paint markers, just see my previous videos. It shows me. They're not hard to make. It's just a matter of diluting some paint with some gloss medium. I don't add any water to it because it dilutes the colour just a bit, and it doesn't make it as chemically strong if you dilute it with water. And seeing as I want to keep them in the jar for a while, the water can evaporate as well. And I knew, because I'd counted the cogs, the spokes on the cogs, so I knew that the words would fit with 2 dots in between each word. I was quite happy with that. And that was what I planned on doing from the beginning. Because the white stood out so much, that's why I added just a few spots of white to the page. And I'm really quite happy with that. So there goes the signature and the date. Why don't you have a go? It's really not that hard to do. It's just a matter of splotching some paint on there. Not really much artistic talent required. But it's fun.